welcome to the second video. We're going to be going over file navigation from R. And the reason that we're doing this first is that I think it's definitely worth your while to be able to know where you are on your own computer when you're inside R, working from an R session. Otherwise, you might get really frustrated by errors from R saying it can't locate a given file, and I think that that can slow down the learning process, so that's why we are covering this first. So file navigation is just the process of finding stuff on your computer. We do it all the time with the Finder, point and click, or search for a file name. But when you start working in R, you're going to have to think about locations of files in terms of a file path. So every file on your computer has a file path associated with it. It's like an address or a name that tells your operating system where to locate it on your hard drive or hard drives. So for example, if you have a file, a CSV file called divelog, and you've saved that in a folder called diving, and that diving folder is saved in your documents folder on your computer, the file path just codifies this by stringing together the folder names separated by forward or backslashes depending on what system you're working on. So with Mac or Unix, it's forward slashes, and on Windows or PCs, it's backslashes. There are two different kinds of file paths, absolute and relative. And the difference between them is going to depend on where you're starting from. So absolute file paths always begin from the same location. They begin from your computer's root directory. So on a Mac, your root directory is that users folder, and you can shorthand that with the tilde. So an absolute path on a Mac might look like, to your divelog CSV might look like the tilde, /documents, /diving, /divelog. On a Windows, since you'll often have partitions with different hard drives, the root directory for an absolute file path is going to start with the name of that partition. So for example, the C drive, /, etc. Relative file paths, on the other hand, start from wherever you are currently. So for example, if you're currently in your documents folder, so you have your Finder or Explorer up, you're in that documents folder, and somebody was going to say, or somebody asked you, where's your divelog? If you were speaking from an absolute point of view, you would say, oh, well, I have to go back to my root directory, and then I can come back through my documents folder again, and then etc. down to the divelog. A relative path is going to say, no, you're already in your documents folder. Just tell me how to get there from where you are now. So you would say, oh, you just go down to the diving folder, and then the divelog is in that diving folder. So that's a relative file path. It's important to understand how to construct both full paths, or a full path is an absolute path, and relative paths. Relative paths are going to be what we'll use the most often because they're what we tend to use in project-oriented workflows. I'm not going to explain exactly what a project-oriented workflow is in words because I think it's much more effective to just see it. So we're going to go construct a project and we'll build some absolute file paths and relative file paths. Okay, so here's the link to the GitHub repository, and we're just going to click that and get taken over to the repo where all of the course materials are posted. And in the data folder, I have uploaded a divelog.csv file. If you click that file, it will open a little preview. And then if you head over here and click raw, it will actually open up the contents of that in its raw form. And you should be able to right click or control click, hit save as, and download that divelog to your desktop. And hit save. And there it is. You can see I've already downloaded it several times in practicing for this video. All right, so now let's head over to RStudio. Okay, I've made the text a little bit bigger, so hopefully this is a little easier to see than the first video. All right, so here we are in RStudio. I'm going to open a new file, or new script. Whenever you start a new script, it's a good idea to give it a title or say something about it. So let's say this is our file navigation, demo script, say who wrote it. And then I usually use a snippet. A snippet is just like a typing shortcut in RStudio. And in this case, I typically start my scripts with a timestamp. So if you hit TS and then tab, it'll bring up this snippet. You hit tab again, and you get a timestamp for the top of your script. Okay, so the first function that I'm going to show you to help us understand absolute and relative file paths and to understand where you are on your computer in this R session is getWD, which stands for get working directory. So you just hit getwd, open parentheses, and then RStudio auto-completes the parentheses for you. If you hit Command Enter, then the console will spit out what your current working directory is. So this is where everything is going to happen in this R session. Right now we're in the root directory. If you see something other than your root directory in the output, then that means that you might be in a project. You can go up here and hit close project, but I don't think that changes your working directory. So if you do that and then execute get working directory again, if you still see something other than your root directory, then you can force RStudio to change your working directory by using the function set working directory, setwd. Setwd takes an argument. I just hit tab to autocomplete the first argument, and it's looking for what directory you want to set your working directory as. So you want to give it a file path, and file paths are always in quotations. So we hit quote, and if you just hit tilde, that will set your working directory to the root directory. Hit Command Enter, and now if you go up and execute get working directory again, you should see your root directory. Okay, so that's nice. We know where we are. We're in our root directory. So where is our dive log? We remember we saved it to the desktop, and we know it's a CSV, so let's use the function read.csv to bring that dive log into R so that we can work with it. When you type read.csv, open parentheses, RStudio will probably bring up this little helper dialog box showing you all of the arguments to the function that you're typing. You can see the first argument is called file. It's just asking you where your CSV is. And whenever your computer's asking you where something is, you have to provide it a file path. So we're going to hit open quotes. And then one of the handy things about RStudio is if you hit tab, it knows you're looking for a file. So if you hit tab, it brings up all of the subdirectories to your working directory, to where you are now. So you can just arrow through these. You know it's on the desktop if you highlight the desktop and hit tab, and then it shows you all of the files listed on your desktop. If you know the name of the file, you can start typing it, and that'll narrow it down. You can either arrow down and select it and then hit tab again, or you can just finish typing it. And that is our complete file path for finding where the dive log is relative to where we are right now. So now if we hit this, if we run this line of code, we see the contents of that CSV. So there's just 2 lines to the CSV, and R was able to read it in just fine because it knows where it is. All right, so this is all fine. It found our CSV. We were able to get it into R, but this isn't within a project. This is actually in no project. This could have been anywhere on your computer. You would have had to construct the file paths relative to your working directory, but it's not very transferable. So to show you what a project-oriented workflow starts with, we're going to start a new project, and I'm not going to save this script. I'll save the one that we do in the next one, and that will be available in the repository. But we'll start a new project associated with a new directory. So you go up to Project, New, and do a new directory. It's a new project, because we're not doing an R package or a Shiny app right now. And we'll create a directory called diving. And I'm going to put it on my desktop. All right, I'm going to hit Create Project. And now it's going to switch over to that new project. All right, so let's find out where we are now. Now, our working directory is the project directory. So the directory that we just created to associate with the project, that's where we're starting from. All right, so let's open a new R script. I'll comment it out again. This is okay. So, can we find our CSV again? Right now we're in the diving directory. So if we want to find that divelog CSV, which is still saved on the desktop, we have to tell read.csv to go to the desktop again. But now when we hit tab, nothing comes up because we don't have any subdirectories in this diving folder that we just created yet. So to go backwards, because we now need to go up to the desktop, you hit ... // and that's going to bring you up one directory level to the desktop. If you were to hit another ... / that's going to bring you up another directory level, and now you have all of the things that are in your root directory, because the desktop is just one level below your root directory on a Mac. Okay, but we don't want to do that. We want to find our diving log. So here it is. We found that. This is a relative path, meaning this is relative to our working directory. And that's fine if you want to keep your dive log on your desktop, and whoever you want to share this project with also has the dive log CSV saved to their desktop. If they don't, then if you sent them the script and they tried to execute this, they would get an error, and that error could look like this. So it's as if we had it's as if we had fed it the wrong address. So if we execute this, meaning we haven't gone up to the desktop where the file actually is, and we're telling it that the file path to the dive log is just this, then R thinks that you're looking for a file called divelog.csv in your current working directory because you haven't told it to go anywhere else. So if you execute this, you're going to get the error, cannot open the connection, there's no such file or directory. This is a super common error, and it can be super frustrating to before you understand file paths. We know we're getting this error because the divelog CSV isn't in there, but somebody who is running your script, it might not be as straightforward. So one of the reasons that we use project-oriented workflows is so that lines of code like this that call on files or locations will work on anyone's computer because they're relative. So to make this work, what we're going to do is build a project, and a typical project. So in a typical project, within the project folder, which is called diving in our case, we're already there. This is one of the buttons that I do use quite a bit. So I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call that folder R, and that's where we're going to save this R script when we save it. I'm also going to create a new folder called data raw, and that's where that's usually the directory that hosts all of my unprocessed data. I also usually create a folder called data clean, or some people will call this output. So that's enough directories to get us started. Now, I'm I'm going to move that divelog.csv into the data raw directory, and I'm just going to do that using the Finder so that we can see what happens after we move it. So first, let me save this script. When I just use the keyboard shortcut to save, so Command S. I'm going to save it in the R folder, and I'm going to call it file navigation. And you don't have to give it the extension. You can type .r if you want to, but it will add it by itself if you don't type anything. So we hit save. And now if we go into that R folder, our script is right there. And then I also use these shortcut buttons to head back up to the project directory. Okay, so let's move that divelog.csv into our data raw folder, and I'm going to do that using the Finder. So I'm already on the desktop. I could probably drag it in here, but I like showing you the full navigation here. So here I'm on my desktop. I'm going to move this divelog CSV into diving and into data raw. So that's moved, and that's where it is now. So let's go back to RStudio, and let's see what happens when we run this line of code. It still can't find the file because we're still telling it that the divelog file is in our project directory, but it's not. It's in a subdirectory, that data raw directory. So we have to tell it that relative to where we are now in the project directory, you need to go down into the data raw subfolder, and that's where you're going to find that divelog.csv. And there it is. The other thing I want to mention is that now with project-oriented workflow, there's no need to use the set working directory function because if you change your working directory to something other than the project directory, then none of the following code is going to work for other people. That makes the code not reproducible in most cases, so it's considered not good practice. And I think this is outlined in the Good Practices PDF in the course materials. All right, that's it for video 2. I will see you all next week.